We've had an exceptionally hot, dry summer here in Dorset, but the last couple of weeks we've had some quite heavy rain and some cooler weather. Now I'm hoping that this might have stimulated some fungi. So that's what we're doing today. We're out for a walk in the woods. We're going to see if we can actually do a bit of successful foraging here. So the plan for today is to get out into the woods. I've got all day. I'm going to go wandering off the track and have a look and see if we can find some edible fungi. I mean, I hope we'll find some fungi to pick, but I won't be very disappointed if we just look at a variety of different fungi. These here are sadly not something I'll be picking. So this is a false chanterelle, and actually there's one that really does look like a chanterelle. So let's have a look at it. I'm going to pick this one so we can have a look at it. So unlike a true chanterelle, it has actual gills. So on a true chanterelle you'd have like gill-like wrinkles underneath that split and then recombine. On a false chanterelle you've just got regular gills, and they split, they fork as you go from the stipe out to the edge of the cap, but they don't recombine. It's got a much more orange stipe than a true chanterelle, and if we tear it in half, the inside of the stipe is the same colour as the rest of the fungus. If you did that with a true chanterelle, you'd see white flesh inside the stalk, solid white flesh. So this is a false chanterelle. Some people do eat them actually, but they can cause gastric upsets, and I believe there is one case of somebody poisoning themselves quite seriously with them. But the fact that we're seeing those is a hopeful sign that we'll see other things. So I'm just going to have a wander off the track here, up into this mossy bit up here, and see what else we might be able to find. Nothing very obvious, but sometimes you've got to be right on top of it to actually see it. Quite a lot of fallen, decayed wood here, which is a good thing. So in forests where this is all cleared away, you don't necessarily get such a good fungal biota on the forest floor. But here there's a lot of cut and fallen wood that's just been left to rot. We are in a stand of balsam fir, I think, maybe. So not necessarily the best place for edible species. Pine tree, there is the odd pine tree in amongst these. I was hoping maybe I might find a cauliflower fungus, but nothing at the moment. There's a really good diversity of forest trees here. So we've got sweet chestnut right in front of us. How can I tell it's sweet chestnut? Well, I keep on saying that the spiraling on the bark is a really distinctive factor with sweet chestnut, but other trees do that. What other trees don't do is produce sweet chestnuts. These are sweet chestnuts as distinct from conkers or horse chestnuts. So these are edible chestnuts, or they will be when they're ripe. A few of them are falling off the tree at the moment, and it's a little bit too early in the season. There might be chestnuts inside some of the bigger ones of these, but probably not. So yeah, there might be a few chestnuts inside some of these. I just noticed a little unidentifiable white fungus down here. I don't know what that is. I'm going to leave it alone. But yeah, it's a bit early for chestnuts. But where was I? So this woodland has got a really lovely diversity of trees. So that was a sweet chestnut. This is an English oak. In front of me here is a beech. There's hazel in amongst here. There's hawthorn even. I see a hawthorn tree right in front of me. This small tree sticking up in the middle is hawthorn. So a really good diversity of forest trees usually provides a really good opportunity for different fungi to flourish, because a lot of them will grow in association with certain trees. The fungi have a relationship with the tree, in fact, a mycorrhizal relationship the fungus, the main part of a fungus is the mycelia that live underground, the thread-like, root-like structures. That's the main body of the fungus. The bit that we pick as a mushroom is the fruiting body. That mycelial network that lives underground, it can be huge, and it's quite good at digesting dead leaves and twigs and organic material that's in the soil. And so in many cases the fungi have a mycorrhizal relationship with the trees, and it acts like an extended root network for the tree. In return, the fungus takes some sugars and things from the roots of the trees, so it's a symbiotic relationship. Usually it doesn't actually harm the tree. Usually it's beneficial to both parties, so it's a mutualism is the form of symbiosis, not parasitism. Anyway, now I see something over there that's kind of yellowish, but I think it's going to be a piece of rotten wood that's broken open, because there's, you know, a lot of rotten wood lying around. Again, good sign. But when you see it in a distance, sometimes it looks like a patch of pale coloured fungi, but it's not. It's just broken up, dead, rotten wood. Now, I've come to this spot before to try to forage. In fact, this will be the third year I've come here, and in previous 2 years found really almost next to nothing. There's a saying attributed to Albert Einstein, I think, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. But we could take a leaf from a different book. There's a saying attributed to Robert the Bruce, I think, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Regardless, it's a lovely piece of woodland here. We're turning into mostly beech, which often isn't very productive for fungi, although we might find bluets here. But I'll have a wander around. It's a little bit early in the year for hedgehog mushrooms. But we'll have a wander through and see what we can find, if anything. The reason I'm coming back here is it's a nice big piece of mixed woodland. It really ought to have fungi if the other conditions are right. And in previous years, I think last year was just too dry in the autumn, and I can't remember what the problem was the previous year. But you can very easily have a piece of woodland that appears completely unproductive for many years, and then when the conditions are right, you get an enormous fungal bloom. So, and the only way to really take advantage of that is to keep on getting out there and checking. So I'm going to have a look over here, because I see some different colours over here, but again I think it's just leaves. Yeah, it's just chestnut leaves. So that broad leaf there, no, it's actually a beech leaf, but it was just catching the light in a way that made it look like a different colour from everything else. And that's sometimes the distance indicator that I go looking for. There's a piece of fallen wood over here. I'm going to have a look on the fallen branches, because fallen beech trees are very good for oyster mushrooms, and it would be exactly the right season for that. So we'll take a good look at all of these fallen trees in this bit of woodland. This one's fallen a bit too recently, I would say. Where's it fallen from? Up there by the look of it. Not fallen yesterday because it's got no leaves on it, but not fallen long enough to have been properly colonised by fungi. Anyway, I'm going to turn the camera off now, save battery. I'll turn it back on when there's something interesting to talk about. So I am seeing a few fungi associated with these half-buried mossy pieces of wood. I think these are probably deceivers. There are some more over here, and again I think probably common deceiver. So called not because it's poisonous, but because it takes many forms, and so it can be actually quite difficult to classify just because you're looking at something that's different every time. But yeah, these mossy half-buried pieces like this can be quite productive for yellowlegs, trumpet chanterelles. Obviously they just have to be present, that's the thing, but it doesn't look to be the case here. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going. We may be in for another empty basket foraging trip here, although I hope not. I've got a couple of other spots I can try, and I've got all day. But as I always say, even if it's a fruitless trip, there are benefits. I mean, this beech plantation, these trees have been planted. This is a stand of beech trees that have been planted, probably for timber. They'll be harvested eventually. They've been planted close together to grow nice and tall and straight, to provide good timber for probably furniture. But while they're growing, it's just amazing to be here in this woodland, this cathedral of trees. There are also things to learn about the place. So I haven't been to this particular patch just before, but let me show you what I'm seeing here, because all of these little stalks sticking up here are bluebells. So these are the remains of bluebell seed pods. So this in spring is a bluebell wood. Good to know, because this is a place to visit in spring, because it's a fantastic natural spectacle to see English bluebells in a big open wood like this. And it looks like there's a lot of them about. All of these white stalks on the ground are bluebell stalks. So definitely we'll be coming back here in spring to see the bluebells. I can see some fallen trees over here, so I'll go and investigate those. So this one is of the approximate vintage that we should be looking for oyster mushrooms on it. It's decayed enough that I can see other fungi have set in and are colonising the timber and breaking it down. This would be a good tree for oyster mushrooms, it's just that they're not on it. So there's a few like that here. I mean, after a while we may have to conclude that if I'm not finding oyster mushrooms in the locality, they're just not here in this place. That does happen. I'm really seeing very few large fungi on, or fruiting bodies, on the forest floor, which probably indicates it hasn't been wet enough for long enough for those to pop up, or maybe some other combination of factors is not quite right at the moment. There are here and there these tracks that go through and have mossy banks on the side. This is often a good place to look for chanterelles. When you find a mossy ridge like this, they just seem to like that kind of conditions. Not here, however. Right, I'm going to follow this track. Interesting bit of Tarzan vine there. Just ivy that's grown all the way up the tree and then cascaded right back down in a great big long vine. That ivy there would be fantastic for making baskets because it's great long stems. Okay, we've got a few things here. I think that might be a little oyster mushroom. Not worth picking, but it is a sign that maybe we might find some more down here. There's a beech tree over there that's shattered and fallen in a spectacular way. Let's go and have a look at that. It looks like this was rotten inside before it fell, which might indicate that it's got fungi already infecting the wood. Yeah, it looks like the heartwood was probably... Oh yeah, there's the culprit, look. Trees can sometimes cope with fungus. It mainly eats the heartwood, of the tree, not the living wood. But you get to a certain point where beech trees, the wood is quite brittle anyway. This has come down quite recently, I would say probably within the last couple of months, because it's still got leaves on it. And as it's come down, it's wedged itself, a piece of itself, in the crook of that tree there. The question is, if there was no one here to hear it, did it make a noise? A rather munched up Boletus, in fact 2 of them, I think probably not Boletus edulis. So we could be walking into a slightly more productive spot. There's another one there. Whatever they are, it's not a bolete that I'm particularly familiar with. Well, I tend to pick the species that I'm most familiar with. It does mean coming home with an empty basket more often than not, but that's just my kind of methodology for avoiding poisoning myself. Lots of yellow in here, and my heart skipped for a moment, but these are false chanterelles, not the real deal. It's a shame, there's quite a lot of them. But there you go. False chanterelles, looking very chanterelle-y actually, but definitely the false version. What's this yellow in here? Is this more false chanterelles? No, it's a birch leaf that's turned yellow. There are some tiny little white fungi. Oysterlings maybe? And these, not sure what these are actually. There is a sprinkling of false chanterelles in there as well. They don't look like velvet shank. Yeah, I don't think that's velvet shank. That's probably one of the things that people mistake for velvet shank. So we'll leave those alone. There is a lot of this common rush around, so it might be that the only productive thing I do today is pick some of this and make one of my rush dollies. So this looks to be the red cracking bolete, which is supposedly edible. I'm not very familiar with it. We used to have this actually in, I say I'm not very familiar with it, we used to have this in the garden at the old house. So I'm not going to pick these. Not familiar enough with them. And I am today being a little bit conservative, small c, with my foraging. I'm only going to pick things that I really am very sure are worthwhile. So there have been quite a few things I could have picked in small quantities. I mean, I think probably if we looked around where I saw that oyster mushroom, if I'd done a more intensive search of that little bit of woodland, we might have found some oyster mushrooms. At the moment the basket is empty bar my rush dolly, which I'll find a spot to deposit for somebody else to discover and wonder about. But there is one more place I can try. So different bit of woodland, different kind of mix of trees. Again, we've got some, I think these are false chanterelles again, looking very different here actually. And then down here we've got, no idea, some little tuft thing, something brown there that I don't recognise as well. So anyway, plenty of fungi here, but again, nothing I've seen yet that I really want to pick, but I've only just got here. So we're going to have a hunt around. I'm going to have a bite to eat as well. Find somebody to sit down. Now I see some interesting shapes over there in the woods. Let's just go and investigate those. Oh, hello. I think we might have parasol mushrooms. Yes, indeed. Look at that. Giant parasols. Maybe just a little bit too big to pick that one actually. They are edible at most of their stages of development, but that one's maybe a little bit big, but usually when you find these you find lots of them, so I shall look around. That's a good mushroom. I mean, that's a huge one. Look at the size of it. Hand for comparison. Probably yeah, a little bit too mature for picking that one. And likewise, well, maybe that one's okay. Actually, that's a slightly smaller one there. Probably all right. But I'm going to have a look around, see if we can find some in the drumstick phase, because that's when they're kind of best for picking. But yeah, that's a really hopeful sign. While we're here though, actually, let's have a look at the key diagnostic factor for giant parasols, because there are fungi that look like this, especially not so much in the UK, but I think in the United States they've got the false parasol, which is quite toxic but looks quite similar. Grows in rings in grass but looks broadly similar. Now the giant parasol, when you look on the stipe, that is the stem underneath there, it has this kind of, well, people describe it as snakeskin pattern. I think it looks like stretch marks, but it has this kind of stripy, snaky scaliness to the stipe. The other false parasols don't have that. See another one here, and I can scarcely believe it's a parasol because it's massive. Look at these, they are enormous. But again, too mature to pick, too big, unfortunately. But wherever we find those, wherever you find some of those, you usually find lots of those. So we'll keep looking. I see another one over there. I mean, the good thing with giant parasols is you can see them a mile off. But again, I think the ones over here are looking a bit too big to pick. That one's fallen over. There's a couple in here which have done us the service of spore printing themselves on the adjacent leaves. You can see the spore print on this one is creamy white. What we got here? Is it? No, it's not. It's false chanterelles. Just the false ones. Right, I'm in a bit of a dead end here and lots of brambles, so I'm going to go back this way. Now maybe I'm being too picky, because I suppose I could have picked one or two of those giant parasols, but once they get really, really big, they tend to be a bit mushy and insubstantial. Lots more false chanterelles. Obviously a good year for those. Now here we are. This looks a little bit more promising. Yeah, although I can see that one's been eaten away by maggots. That brown staining there is maggot damage, so we won't have that. Lots and lots of parasols. These look like brackets growing on this fallen log, but they're actually just growing either side of it. Looking at these parasols, they are quite bug eaten, so it doesn't look like we're going to be picking parasol mushrooms today. Never mind. Not a fungus, but again, I think these are balsam fir. I'm not sure, maybe not, but anyway, lots and lots of sticky resin coming out of this one. Wonderful smell to it. You can make firelighters from that stuff by collecting it, melting it and putting it on, one of these fir cones. It makes a very good firelighter. We're not here for that today though. Now I have found in this location before cauliflower fungus, and it's a really good edible. It grows on the base of conifers. It was parasitic on conifers actually. So we'll have a look around in the hope that we might find a cauliflower fungus. Now here's some things we could pick. Shaggy ink cap, or lawyer's wig, Coprinus comatus. That's edible, actually quite good, very fragile, very difficult to, they kind of dissolve into a black inky substance, but there's another young one there. Not worth picking unless you find them in quantity really, because they cook down to almost nothing. Yeah, the lawyer's wig, the shaggy ink cap, you really need a lot of them if you're going to eat them, because they cook down quite a lot. Very nice delicate flavour, absolutely excellent, just fried in butter. So it might seem like I'm being really picky in my foraging, picky about what I pick or don't pick in my foraging today, and I think that's probably true. I mean, obviously I will only pick what I know is edible, but also I'll only pick what is good, and furthermore I will only pick what is abundant. So these shaggy ink caps, there's only 2 of them here that are worth picking, and I think it's probably more important that I leave them and let them produce their spore, their inky spore material, and reproduce. It's not worth me picking 2 of something just to get them home and make the smallest and saddest possible omelette. There's a lot of fresh deer tracks here. I'm on my own today, didn't bring Eva. Jenny's at home, she's got other stuff to do, so that allows me to do a really aimless walk in the woods actually. So whereas when we're out as a group, we quite often we have an objective to walk, to get, you know, complete a circuit of a walk. When I'm on my own, I can be a little bit more aimless and wander. All of these tracks here are deer. See this, you can see like 2 toes. Lots and lots of deer tracks. I'm seeing spent shell cases as well, so and I saw a hunter's hide here, so obviously they are hunting deer in this little bit of woodland, which is a good thing that I'm wearing a non-natural colour, just so I don't get mistaken for a deer through the bushes. It's a fairly self-contained bit of woodland. There's only 1 or 2 different ways in here. There would be signs up if they were shooting in here today. So this might be another one of my empty basket foraging trips, and I'm not sad about that at all. Actually, it's a lovely day to be out in the woods. It's very nice and breezy. There's the occasional bit of rain. We've had really high winds actually, and a lot of the chestnuts have come down, but these are not ripe yet, so we can't forage chestnuts just yet. But it's looking to be a good year for chestnuts. It's been a good year for fruit and nuts in general, just because of the dry, warm spring we had for pollination, and then lots of sunshine for the plants to make sugars to swell up the fruit and so on. But anyway, I am going to go off the track a bit more because, as I say, I haven't got Jenny and Eva with me today, so I can go beating through the bush. So I think I've decided, if this is actually another empty basket trip, I'm not going to publish this video until I go out and have a successful foraging trip for mushrooms, and then I'll put the 2 things together, and so you'll see the failure and then the hopeful success. So if you're watching this video, it means there is some success coming just in a moment, perhaps from a different day. Normally I'd sit down for a bit of lunch, but I'm just going to nibble this as I go. Standard lightweight foraging lunch here for me: cheese, cabanossi, peanuts and raisins. Well, this is interesting. So, big stack of hardwood logs, looks like a mixture of ash and beech and birch, and that is chicken of the woods, one of the species of fungi that people most highly prize and get excited about, because this is a fungus that has a texture a bit like chicken breast. I think this specimen might be a little bit too mature to pick, and it's not my favourite fungus, despite being quite realistically chicken-like. I always found that by the time it's chicken-like, it's quite dry, and before it gets dry, it's just like kind of wet tofu, and it's raining. So again, we're going to leave that now. We're just going to marvel at that and leave it, and it's a little home for this slug here as well. So we're going to leave that slug palace, chicken of the woods. I'm just not in the mood for picking things, it seems, today, but we'll see. We might find something else. So yeah, on this particular day, we're going home empty-handed. I think that's partly because I've been too fussy. I came out here with the hope of picking seps, cauliflower fungus, maybe chanterelles, and kind of set myself up for disappointment. I found lots of fungi, just nothing I really fancied picking today. Hang on a minute, I see something over there though. Let's go and have a look. Well, again, not something I'm going to confidently eat. I think that is some kind of incap type thing. Don't know what that is, but we're not picking it. So yeah, we've seen lots of fungi, just nothing I fancy picking. But fear not, the next part of this video has some success in it. I'm saying that even though it hasn't been recorded yet. Out for a walk with Doggo, and we stumbled across a mixture of field mushrooms and horse mushrooms, and lots of them. So I've already filled a bag, but we'll pick as many as we can carry, and it's going to be mushrooms on toast for dinner. Now these are different. This is Marasmius oreades. This is the fairy ring mushroom, but also, would you shut up? So not quite so easy to recognise as your agaricus mushrooms, except that these ones have this umbo on the centre of the cap. They've got a kind of tan coloured cap, gills underneath with little mini gills at the edges, and the stem is always really tough on these. So you can tie that in a knot, that stem, that stipe. I've just broken this one open just to make sure that there aren't any maggots inside, because that can be a problem with this fungus. Another big flush of fairy ring mushrooms. Not in a ring, they're kind of in an arc across the thing here. It probably was once a ring. But anyway, that bag's full up, so I've got another bag here. Plastic bags are not the ideal container for mushrooms, but in a pinch it'll do. We haven't got far to go to get them home. So an absolutely phenomenal haul of mushrooms from that field. We just stumbled across them. I wasn't even looking for the mushrooms. We were just walking the dog and we found these are fairy ring mushrooms. I'll talk about them in a moment. These, I think, are a mixture of field mushrooms and horse mushrooms, and it doesn't actually matter. There is a rule of thumb with agaricus mushrooms, and these are definitely agaricus. There is a rule of thumb with agaricus, is basically that if you just give them a little score with your fingernail on the cap, the ones that are not good to eat, the yellow stainer and a couple of other species, will stain yellow when they're damaged. So you'll see yellow staining often on the broken stalk or anywhere where the cap has taken a bruise. Now it's important to note, nothing I tell you in these videos is enough for you to just go out with no experience and pick wild mushrooms. You shouldn't treat these videos as definitive in identifying mushrooms. I've spent a lot of time and effort learning about mushrooms, making sure that I'm safe. By all means, be encouraged by what I'm doing. It is possible to learn this, but there is something to learn. I did say I was going to talk about these fairy ring mushrooms. So yeah, again, you need to be able to identify what you're eating, but a couple of the identifying features of the fairy ring mushroom is this umbo on the top of the cap here. It's like a little nipple or boss on the top of the cap, and the stipe, the stalk. Well, if I can just show you, it doesn't usually come away from the cap without breaking the cap up, but it's tough. You can't, well, you could eat it. I mean, you could dry that and make it into stock, but yeah, it's tough and fibrous and woolly. It's like a piece of string. There are other factors for identifying these, but those are two of the very important ones. They smell lovely and fresh and mushroomy. Anyway, going to prepare these, get them cleaned up, and cook some mushrooms on toast. Well, mushroom rarebit, I think. Two different approaches for two different types of mushrooms. The agaricus mushrooms, I'm just going to brush them. These are fast growing mushrooms. They've not been in that field for long. And so I'm just going to brush the tops of the mushrooms. I'm going to break them in half and inspect in here, make sure there's no maggots in there, and there are not. And that's good enough. They're going to be cooked anyway, so any germs that are on them will be destroyed by cooking. The fairy ring mushrooms, slightly different. These are a slower growing mushroom, so these have been in the field for up to a couple of weeks maybe. And so I'm going to wash these, because that time they've spent in the field has been long enough for bits of dust to get blown up into the gills. But again, I'm going to break them in half, break them up, just make sure there's no maggots. You sometimes do get maggots in the top part here in this species, but it looks like we're doing okay today. So these I will put in a colander, give them a good rinse. You may have heard me say that I don't wash wild mushrooms before, so am I a hypocrite for washing these? Maybe, I don't know. But mushrooms I pick in the woods, mushrooms that I pick up off the forest floor, if they're really, really dirty, I just don't pick them. And things like the boletes, so porcini or sep, I don't wash them because they are literally like a sponge. They have pores instead of gills underneath the cap, and they are literally like a sponge. And if you wash them, that fills up with water. And especially if you're going to dry them, which I often do, that means basically you're wetting them in order to dry them, to dehydrate them. And it takes a lot longer to dehydrate them because of the amount of water they take on. Yeah, see, there we go. That one is no good. That's been on there for too long. You can see the cap is hollow and something's eaten it away inside. So that one will go in the compost. These fairy ring mushrooms are disregarded by foragers, and often a lot of people will tell you these aren't very good. I think they're really good. I think they're one of the tastiest common mushrooms. A lot of it will depend on the specimens that you find, because this species of mushroom dries out. In dry weather, these mushrooms just shrivel up and become dehydrated, and then when you get wet weather, they come back to life. And the process of drying mushrooms enhances the flavour. There we go. So there's another one that's no good. So you can see there's some activity going on inside the cap there. That'll just go in the compost. But yeah, so dehydrating mushrooms, when you do it on purpose, enhances their flavour. And so I think sometimes when you get these fairy ring mushrooms and they have self-dehydrated and rehydrated several times during the course of the summer, because as I say, they are quite a slow growing mushroom, if they've done that several times, then they've done the thing that makes mushrooms really tasty. Anyway, that's some of those. Actually, they really don't look like they need a wash, but I think I will. Now, the other important thing with wild mushrooms is that if you find a species you haven't eaten before, obviously you need to make sure that you have identified it. But also, it's a good idea to only eat a little bit at the first sitting, because mushrooms are one of those things where some people are just sensitive or allergic to certain types of mushrooms. And so if it's your first time eating any given species of mushroom, it's a good idea to just go easy and just make sure you don't suffer any serious gastric upset. It's usually unpleasant rather than dangerous. But yeah, sometimes if you have a sensitivity to a given species of mushroom, you can end up spending the night on the loo. So it's worth just a little bit of caution and moderation on your first time. So I'll go and run those under the tap, leave them to soak for a little bit, then let the dirt loosen, and then give them another rinse to actually wash off any dirt that has loosened. Meanwhile, as I say, with the agaricus mushrooms here, I've got the approach is going to be a little bit more gentle. I'll probably just discard the stalks because we've got so much nice mushroom here that really it's only worth keeping the bits that we know are very good. So there's a bit there that doesn't look so great, so I'll get rid of that. And yeah, as I say, some of these I think might be horse mushrooms. There is a way to tell. Horse mushrooms have an aniseed scent to them. Field mushrooms just smell mushroomy. So let's have a look. This is one I suspect of being a horse mushroom. Yes. Ever such a faint aniseed scent in there. So we've got a mixture of field mushrooms and horse mushrooms here, as I suspected. You can sometimes tell because there's almost like a veil underneath. You can tell, but not always, because they are quite variable. But again, let's try. Yeah, I think yeah. Whereas these are field mushrooms, thinner in the flesh actually of the mushroom. But I'm inspecting them all inside because I'm expecting to find
that some of them might have maggots in. But like I say, for agaricus, and you have to be sure you have got agaricus mushrooms, which is your kind of mushrooms that look like the ones you buy in the shops, the white mushrooms you buy in the shops, you can, as long as you haven't got something that stains yellow or stinks. So if they stain or stink, they're poisonous, or at least inedible. If they don't, and they are definitely agaricus, they're usually good to eat. You know, all other factors being equal. Ah, here we are. So that one's been munched. That's going to go in the compost. Now you can sometimes get a tiny bit of yellow staining on safe agaricus. So this one's here has maybe just gone a tiny bit yellow, but a tiny bit of yellow staining is fine. It does happen on some species. You'll know if you've got the yellow stainer, you just score it with your fingernail and immediately it turns bright chrome yellow. They're in very good condition, most of these. Right, a bit of butter in this pan, which is just warming. And the fairy ring mushrooms will take a bit longer to cook than the field mushrooms, but we're going to cook everything really thoroughly anyway, because I want to cook most of the moisture out of it. So in with the fairy ring mushrooms. They are a bit wet, so they'll stew a little bit first, which will tenderize them, bring some flavour out of them as well. Right, while that's happening, I'm going to cut some slices of bread. The bread is from Morrison's. This is wheat, spelt and rye. I cut a big chunk off the end because I want some big slices out the middle. So, I reckon, so like about 1.5 centimetres thick. And those are going to go on an oven-proof tray. Something like that. And I'll get those under the grill and get them toasted on one side. So while that's happening there, this is happening here. More butter. Probably about 20 grams of butter. And we'll get that melted in the pan. If you could only smell the aroma that's coming off of these mushrooms. It's so mushroomy. The butter is melted, so about the same amount of flour. Just plain flour. And we'll fry that together to make a roux. Tiny bit more. Tend to judge this by eye really, so it could be a little bit more than that, so tiny bit more flour. I'm just going to fry that flour for a little bit and then we add the liquid. Now, if we were making a bechamel, we'd add milk to this to make the sauce. I'm going to add beer. St. Peter's Plum Porter. Just while that roux is frying, I'll tell you what this tastes like. Oh, it's a fantastic fruity, rich, sweet, dark beer. Tiny little bit of hoppy bitterness, but it's actually quite a sweet beer. So that's now ready to go. So another bit of liquid in there. And immediately that thickened up, so I'm just going to lift it off the heat, and we'll have a little bit more. Tiny bit more. We'll just cook that for a bit. It might need a bit more liquid. I might put a splash of milk in there as well, because I feel like that's maybe enough beer. So little splash of milk, not much, because we want this to be quite a thick sauce. Field mushrooms can go in with these now. I'm just going to break up any bits that I feel are too big to go in as they are. So juggling a few things here. Yeah, that sauce looks like it's about the right consistency now. It will thicken a bit because I'm going to add some cheese in a minute. And so into this sauce I've got some Jarlsberg cheese. I've got some mature cheddar, just a block of standard cheddar. Right, I'm just going to whisk that in now for a moment, just to get that starting to go in. And I've got some Grana Padano, which is a really quite strong tasting Italian hard cheese. So we'll just have a little bit of that in there. This is like a seasoning. Or cheesening. Okay, so that's my 3 cheeses in there. And you can see that sauce is starting to change in consistency now because of those cheeses in there. Dried mixed herbs, just a little pinch. And then also into this sauce, I've got some little cubes of smoked ham. I need to change to a different whisk now. This one won't get tangled up with the bits of ham. One final flavour for the sauce is just going to be a few frozen chives from the garden. Obviously they weren't frozen when I picked them. So that's the sauce. I've moved these mushrooms onto the bigger ring because there's a lot of liquid we still need to drive off. So we need to reduce that back down until the mushrooms are frying again in the butter that is in there somewhere. While that's happening though, we can have a little grind of pepper and a bit of salt. Not too much because there is salty cheese in the sauce. Mushrooms are very close now. Toast is done on one side. Now, and there is a method to my madness because the mushrooms and sauce that we put on here are going to kind of soak into the bread and make it all gooey and luscious and stuff. And then we're going to put it under the grill, and so it will have a toasted fringe and it will be all bubbly and hot and gooey. So yeah, the mushrooms are getting close to done now. So there's very little liquid left in there. I'm going to stir them around so they pick up all of this stuff that's on the pan here. But look at the colour of this juice that's come out of them. This is what you get for using the slightly more developed field mushrooms, the ones with the chocolate brown gills, and the flavour is proportional to the colour. Fairy ring mushrooms, they're still in there. That's a piece of fairy ring mushroom, but it's been soaked in the liquid that came out of the field mushroom, so they all look the same colour now. So what's going to happen now is we kind of divide those in to 4, something like that, and then those mushrooms will go onto these 4 slices of toast, if I can make that happen. So that was that whole tray full of mushrooms. I mean, there were some discards in there, but that whole tray of mushrooms has cooked down to just enough mushrooms for 4 slices of toast. Imagine, if you will, the way the flavour must have concentrated here. I'll just redistribute these if some of them look a bit unfair. Now this sauce. And this is just going to go over the top of the mushrooms. Like that. So it's just touching the edge of the toast. I'm not wasting a single drop of this sauce. So we may recruit LGBT teaspoon in a minute, just to make sure we get every little drop of sauce out of that pan. Okay, we're nearly there. That's just now got to go under the grill to brown that off. Look at that. Nice. So there used to be a thing called toast toppers, which was these sad little cans of mushroom soup that you spread on toast and then grilled. I suppose this is the way to do it properly. Well, yeah, the bottom is crispy and the top is gooey and melty and luscious, and I'm going to try and pick that up and take a bite. Wish me luck. Really taste the mushrooms. What do you think, Jenny? Good?
Yeah.
And I've got the rest of my St. Peter's plum porter. Go with that. Cheers. There's a little bit of toast with no mushrooms. So, wild mushroom success. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.